The radar blip appeared at 3:47 hours, moving too fast to be friendly, too erratic to be anything they'd seen before. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez leaned closer to his scope, the green glow painting his face in sickly light as the contact danced across enemy airspace like a wounded bird. 3 minutes earlier, Major Valentina Viper Kozlova had radioed her final transmission from grid Oscar 77, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her forward operating base. Blackbird Actual, this is Viper, taking heavy fire, requesting immediate CAS. My position is compromised, equipment destroyed. I'm going dark. The transmission had ended with static and the distant rumble of artillery. Now, 18 hours later, something was coming home that shouldn't exist. The A-10 Thunderbolt II limping across Pakistani airspace bore Kozlova's tail number, but half its starboard wing was missing, the titanium bathtub cockpit scarred by impacts that should have been fatal. Most unsettling of all, the IFF transponder was broadcasting a code that had been retired 3 years ago, after Kozlova's supposed death in a training accident over Nevada. At Bagram Airfield, Colonel Marcus Webb stood in the tower, binoculars trained on the approaching aircraft. The Warthog's distinctive twin engines wheezed and coughed, leaving a trail of black smoke against the dawn sky. Ground crews scrambled below, emergency vehicles racing toward the runway, but Webb remained motionless, studying the impossible sight before him. He'd signed Kozlova's death certificate himself, had spoken at her memorial service, had watched her mother weep over a flag-draped coffin that contained only personal effects and a flight suit. "Sir," Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio, "the aircraft is requesting permission to land. Pilot identifies as Major Kozlova, authentication code Charlie 7 Delta 9. Webb's blood ran cold. Charlie 7 Delta 9 had been Kozlova's personal code, known only to her and the intelligence community. It had died with her, buried in classified files that would never see daylight. Yet here was her voice, tired but unmistakably hers, requesting clearance to land an aircraft that had been destroyed in enemy territory a day and a half ago. The colonel raised his radio with a trembling hand. "Tower to approaching A-10, state your condition and cargo manifest." Static filled the airwaves for 10 seconds that felt like hours. Then came the voice that haunted Webb's dreams, the voice of a woman he'd loved and lost and mourned, now speaking from beyond what should have been her grave. "Tower, this is Major Kozlova. Condition is complicated, cargo is classified, and Marcus," the pause stretched like eternity, "we need to talk." Webb's world tilted as the ghost in the machine began her final approach, bringing with her answers to questions that should never have needed asking. The A-10's landing gear deployed with mechanical precision, despite the aircraft's battered condition, hydraulic fluid streaming from multiple punctures in the wing assembly. Major Valentina Kozlova worked the stick with practiced ease, compensating for the missing control surfaces through pure instinct and 3,000 hours of combat flight time. The Thunderbolt II had always been an ugly bird, built for punishment rather than grace, but now it looked like something dragged from a scrapyard and somehow convinced to fly. In the tower, Webb watched through his binoculars as the aircraft touched down, sparks flying from a damaged landing gear strut. The Warthog rolled to a stop near Hangar 7, its engines finally falling silent after what must have been an impossible journey. Ground crews surrounded the aircraft immediately, their faces a mixture of professional concern and barely concealed fear. None of them had been briefed on what they might find inside. Webb descended from the tower with deliberate steps, each footfall echoing in the stairwell like a countdown to revelation. 3 years ago, Valentina Kozlova had been the finest close air support pilot in the Air Force, a woman who could thread an A-10 through a needle and put 30mm rounds exactly where they needed to go. She'd also been the woman who'd shared his bed, his secrets, and his dreams of a life beyond the endless deployments and classified missions that defined their existence. Her death had been swift and brutal, according to the after-action report. Engine failure during a routine training flight over restricted airspace, aircraft impact with terrain, pilot killed instantly. No body recovered due to the sensitive nature of the crash site. Webb had accepted the official story because accepting it was easier than asking questions that might lead to answers he wasn't cleared to hear. Now, as he approached the silent A-10, those questions came flooding back. Why had Kozlova been flying alone? Why had the crash site been so quickly secured by intelligence personnel? And why had her personal effects, supposedly recovered from the wreckage, shown no signs of fire damage or impact trauma? The cockpit canopy cracked open with a hydraulic hiss, and Webb's heart stopped. The woman who emerged was undoubtedly Valentina Kozlova, but she was wrong in ways that defied explanation. Her flight suit bore patches from squadrons that didn't exist, her skin was pale as winter moonlight, and her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences no human should survive. She climbed down from the aircraft with fluid grace, her boots touching the tarmac as if she were stepping onto sacred ground. When their eyes met across 30 yards of Afghan dust, Webb saw recognition flicker in her gaze, followed by something that might have been regret. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying impossible distance in the still air. "I told you we need to talk." The hangar fell silent except for the tick of cooling metal and the whisper of wind through bullet holes in the A-10's fuselage. Webb stared at the woman who couldn't be standing before him, searching for words that might make sense of the impossible. Around them, ground crews backed away, their instincts warning them that they were witnessing something beyond their security clearance, beyond their understanding, beyond the comfortable boundaries of the war they thought they were fighting. Kozlova removed her helmet, revealing hair that was longer than regulation, streaked with premature silver that hadn't been there 3 years ago. She carried herself with the same confident bearing Webb remembered, but there was something else now, a weight that seemed to bend the air around her. "The mission briefing said you were dead," Webb managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Kozlova's smile was sharp as winter wind. "The mission briefing said a lot of things, Marcus. Most of them were lies." She gestured toward the A-10, its battle-scarred hull gleaming dully in the morning light. "This bird and I have been places that don't appear on any map, fighting an enemy that doesn't officially exist. We've been doing the work that keeps the lights on, the work that lets everyone else sleep soundly in their beds without knowing what lurks in the dark." Webb felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, reality reorganizing itself around truths he'd never been meant to learn. "What kind of work?" "The kind that requires sacrifice," Kozlova replied, pulling a sealed envelope from her flight suit pocket. "The kind that asks everything of the people who do it, including their lives, their identities, their very existence. I died 3 years ago, Marcus. Everything that happened after that has been borrowed time." She extended the envelope toward him, and Webb noticed her hands were steady as surgical instruments despite whatever ordeal she'd endured. "This contains proof of what I've been doing, where I've been, and why it matters. But before you read it, you need to understand something. Once you know the truth, you can never go back to the comfortable lie. You'll be part of this whether you want to be or not." Webb stared at the envelope as if it contained his own death warrant. Around them, the airfield buzzed with routine activity, mechanics servicing aircraft, pilots preparing for routine patrols, everyone going about their business in blissful ignorance of the conversation unfolding in their midst. He could walk away, report Kozlova's return through proper channels, let someone else deal with whatever madness had brought her back from the dead. Instead, he reached for the envelope, his fingers brushing against hers for a moment that felt like electricity. "Tell me everything." Kozlova's expression softened fractionally, revealing a glimpse of the woman he'd once known beneath the mystery she'd become. "Not here. Too many ears, too many eyes. Tonight after the base goes quiet. Hangar 12, the one they never use. Come alone and Marcus." She paused, studying his face with eyes that seemed to see through him. Bring your service weapon. You're going to need it. The envelope felt heavier than it should as Webb tucked it inside his jacket. Whatever secrets it contained, whatever truths Kozlova had returned to share, he sensed they would change everything he thought he knew about the war, the military, and the woman standing before him. As Kozlova walked away toward the base commander's office, presumably to begin the impossible process of explaining her resurrection to official channels, Webb remained beside the wounded. The aircraft bore scars that told stories he couldn't read, impact marks and scoring that spoke of battles fought in skis no one would ever acknowledge. Most disturbing of all were the modifications. Additional hardpoints for weapons systems he didn't recognize, electronics packages that seemed decades ahead of anything in the current inventory, and painted on the nose, a kill tally that numbered in the hundreds. The numbers were wrong, impossibly high for any single pilot's career, but they were rendered in Kozlova's distinctive hand, each mark precise and purposeful. Webb had seen her add kills to her previous aircraft, had watched her methodically document every successful mission with the same attention to detail she brought to everything else in her life. These marks were hers, but they represented a level of combat activity that should have been impossible for someone officially dead for 3 years. Technical Sergeant Maria Santos approached from the maintenance shack, her expression troubled. Santos had been working on military aircraft for 15 years, had seen everything from routine maintenance to battlefield repairs, but the A-10 before her clearly challenged her expertise. "Sir," Santos began, her voice carefully neutral, "we've completed our initial assessment of the aircraft. The damage pattern is unusual." Webb turned his attention to the senior enlisted woman, grateful for the distraction from his spiraling thoughts. Unusual how? Santos gestured toward the missing wing section, her professional demeanor barely concealing her confusion. "The metal wasn't torn or sheared by impact, sir. It was cut, precisely and deliberately, by something we can't identify. The edges are sealed, almost welded, which shouldn't be possible with current technology. And the bullet holes," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "they're not from any ammunition in our database. The entry patterns suggest projectiles moving at velocities that exceed anything in the current threat assessment." Webb studied the aircraft with new eyes, seeing not just battle damage, but evidence of encounters with technologies that shouldn't exist. "What's your professional assessment, Sergeant?" "Sir, this aircraft has been engaged in combat operations against forces using advanced weapons systems. Based on the damage patterns and repair work, I'd estimate at least 50 separate engagements over an extended period. The pilot who brought this bird home is either the luckiest person alive or the most skilled combat aviator I've ever encountered." Santos hesitated, then added, "There's something else, sir. The aircraft's flight computer shows destinations and waypoints that don't match any known airfields or facilities. It's like this A-10 has been operating in a completely different theater, one that doesn't appear on any of our maps." Webb felt the weight of the envelope in his jacket, its contents suddenly more ominous than before. Whatever Kozlova had been doing for the past 3 years, wherever she'd been flying, it existed in a shadow world that operated parallel to the conventional military structure he understood. The sun climbed higher in the Afghan sky, casting long shadows across the airfield as Webb contemplated the impossible puzzle before him. By evening, he would have answers to questions he'd never thought to ask, but those answers would come with a price he was only beginning to understand. The remainder of the day passed in a haze of routine duties and suppressed anxiety. Webb attended briefings, reviewed intelligence reports, and maintained the facade of normalcy while his mind churned through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. The envelope remained unopened in his jacket, its secrets burning against his chest like a brand. Colonel Webb found himself unable to concentrate on routine tasks, his mind constantly drifting to Kozlova's return and the implications of her impossible resurrection. During the afternoon briefing, he caught himself staring out the window toward Hangar 7, where her A-10 sat under guard, drawing curious glances from personnel who'd heard rumors but lacked security clearance for details. Major Patricia Hendricks, the base intelligence officer, approached him after the briefing with a concerned expression. "Sir, I've been getting inquiries from Washington about our unexpected visitor. Seems her return has triggered some automated alerts in the system. How do you want me to handle the situation?" Webb considered his response carefully. "Route all inquiries through my office for now. Major Kozlova's reappearance is a sensitive matter that requires careful handling. I'll brief you on the details once I have a complete picture of the situation." Hendricks nodded, but Webb could see the questions in her eyes. The intelligence community thrived on information, and Kozlova's return represented a significant gap in their understanding of ongoing operations. By tomorrow, there would be people asking questions that Webb wasn't sure he could answer, demands for explanations that might not exist in any official documentation. As evening approached, the base settled into its routine rhythm. Guard rotations changed, aircraft returned from patrol, and the usual bustle of military life continued around the secret growing in Hangar 7. Webb finished his paperwork with mechanical precision, his thoughts focused on the approaching rendezvous in Hangar 12. At 2200 hours, he made his way across the darkened airfield, his service weapon secured in its holster as Kozlova had suggested. The hangar stood empty and silent, a cavernous space filled with shadows and the lingering smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid. Webb waited in the darkness, every sound amplified by the enclosed space, every movement casting strange shadows in the dim emergency lighting. Kozlova materialized from the shadows like a ghost, her approach so silent that Webb's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon before recognition set in. She'd changed from her flight suit into civilian clothes that somehow made her seem more dangerous rather than less, as if the uniform had been containing something that was now free to manifest itself. "You came," she said, her voice carrying across the empty hangar with impossible clarity. Webb nodded, his throat suddenly dry. "I need to know what happened to you, Valentina. I need to understand why everyone thinks you're dead when you're clearly standing right in front of me." Kozlova moved to the center of the hangar, her movements fluid and purposeful. "What happened to me is part of a larger story, one that begins with the mission that supposedly killed me and extends to conflicts most people can't imagine. I didn't die in that training accident, Marcus. I was recruited." The word hung in the air between them like a physical presence, heavy with implications that Webb was only beginning to grasp. Whatever organization had recruited Kozlova operated outside normal military channels, beyond the oversight of conventional command structures, in the shadows where official accountability couldn't reach. "Recruited by whom?" Webb asked, though part of him already feared the answer. Kozlova's smile was razor-sharp in the dim light. "By the people who fight the wars that can't be won through conventional means, against enemies that can't be acknowledged through official channels. We're the thin line between the world everyone knows and the world that lurks just beyond perception, waiting for the chance to break through." The sealed envelope in Webb's jacket seemed to pulse with its own weight as Kozlova continued her explanation. Whatever secrets it contained, whatever proof she'd brought back from her impossible journey, would reshape his understanding of everything he thought he knew about military service, national security, and the true nature of the conflicts being fought in humanity's name. The fluorescent lights in Hangar 12 flickered to life as Kozlova activated a concealed switch, banishing the comforting shadows that had hidden them from the world outside. In the harsh illumination, Webb could see the changes in her more clearly, the premature silver streaking her dark hair, the network of fine scars along her jawline, the way she held herself with the coiled tension of someone who'd learned to expect violence from unexpected directions. "The organization doesn't have an official name," Kozlova began, settling onto a maintenance crate with casual grace. We call ourselves the Night Watch, though that's more poetry than designation. We're recruited from the best of the best, people who have proven themselves capable of impossible missions and questionable moral flexibility. Our mandate is simple: protect civilization from threats that exist outside normal understanding. Webb remained standing, his military bearing automatic despite the extraordinary circumstances. What kind of threats? The kind that use technology decades ahead of anything in our current arsenal. The kind that operate from bases that don't appear on satellite imagery. The kind that view humanity as an obstacle to be removed rather than an adversary to be defeated. Kozlova's expression darkened as she continued. 3 years ago, our intelligence assets detected increased activity from what we designation A-7 entities operating along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. My death was staged to provide cover for infiltration operations. The explanation struck Webb like a physical blow. Every detail of Kozlova's memorial service came flooding back. The honor guard, the flag presentation, the grief that had consumed him for months afterward. All of it had been theater, carefully orchestrated to hide the truth of her continued existence and her recruitment into this shadow organization. The A-7 entities, Webb managed, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. What are they? Kozlova stood and moved to the hangar's grimy window, staring out at the Afghan darkness beyond the base perimeter. That's where things get complicated, Marcus. The official classification is non-terrestrial intelligence, but that sanitized language doesn't capture the reality of what we're dealing with. They're not from around here, if you understand my meaning. The weight of her words settled over Webb like a physical presence. Non-terrestrial intelligence. The phrase carried implications that challenged every assumption about humanity's place in the universe, about the nature of the conflicts being fought in remote corners of the world, about the true purpose of military operation that seemed to serve no obvious strategic objective. How long have they been here? Webb asked, surprised by his own acceptance of what should have been an impossible revelation. Longer than anyone wants to admit. Probably centuries, maybe longer. They operate through human proxies, providing advanced technology in exchange for cooperation. Some of those proxies are willing collaborators, others are coerced or controlled through means we don't fully understand. Kozlova turned back toward him, her expression grim. The Taliban forces you've been fighting aren't just insurgents with improvised explosives and Soviet-era weapons. Some of them have been equipped with systems that shouldn't exist. Webb thought back to recent engagements, anomalies in enemy capabilities that had been attributed to improved training or captured equipment, projectiles that moved faster than anything in the threat database, defensive systems that seemed to anticipate attack patterns, coordination between disparate groups that suggested communication methods beyond conventional radio. The A-10 you flew back, he said, understanding beginning to dawn. The damage pattern Sergeant Santos described. Combat engagement with A-7 technology, yes. My aircraft took hits from energy weapons that cut through armor like paper and kinetic systems that fired projectiles at velocities approaching the theoretical maximum. The fact that I made it back at all is a testament to the Thunderbolt's ruggedness, and 3 years of learning how to fight an enemy that operates by completely different rules. Kozlova reached into her pocket and withdrew a small device that looked like a hybrid of smartphone and military radio, its surface displaying information in characters that hurt Webb's eyes to look at directly. This is how we communicate with Night Watch Command, how we receive mission assignments and intelligence updates. It's also how they monitor our vital signs, location, and mission status. If I die or go missing, this device will transmit a signal that triggers immediate response protocols. The implications of constant surveillance by an organization he'd never heard of, using technology that shouldn't exist, added another layer of unease to Webb's growing understanding. What do they want from you now? Why reveal yourself to me? Because the situation has changed, Marcus. The Echo-7 entities are preparing for something big, a coordinated operation that will expose their presence to the world whether they want it or not. When that happens, conventional military forces are going to need information and support from people who understand what they're really fighting against. Kozlova moved closer, her expression intense with urgency that transcended personal history. I need you to prepare your personnel, your aircraft, your entire command structure for revelations that will challenge everything they believe about the nature of warfare, about humanity's place in the universe, about the true purpose of the missions they've been flying. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Webb processed the magnitude of what Kozlova was asking. She wanted him to prepare his people for a war that operated outside the boundaries of conventional understanding, against an enemy that possessed technology beyond current human capabilities, in service of protecting a civilization that had no idea it was under threat. "What's in the envelope?" he asked finally, gesturing toward the sealed packet that had been burning against his chest all day. Kozlova's expression softened fractionally, revealing a glimpse of the woman he'd once known beneath the mystery she'd become. Proof, Marcus, photographs, technical specifications, combat footage, testimony from other Night Watch operatives. Everything you need to understand that what I'm telling you isn't the delusion of someone who's been under too much stress for too long. She paused, studying his face in the harsh fluorescent light. But once you look at that evidence, once you accept the reality of what we're fighting against, you'll be part of this whether you want to be or not. The Night Watch has ways of ensuring operational security that go well beyond traditional military discipline. Webb felt the weight of decision pressing down on him like a physical force. He could walk away, report Kozlova's return through official channels, let someone else deal with the impossible implications of her story. Or he could open the envelope, examine the evidence, and accept responsibility for protecting his people from threats they couldn't imagine. His hand moved to the envelope almost without conscious volition, fingers tracing its sealed edges as he contemplated a choice that would reshape not just his understanding of military service, but his entire worldview. "Show me," he said finally, breaking the seal with hands that remained steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to learn. The photographs spilled onto the maintenance crate like leaves from a poisoned tree, each image more impossible than the last. Webb stared at clear, high-resolution images of aircraft that defied conventional aerodynamics, weapons systems that seemed to bend light around their projectiles, humanoid figures in what appeared to be advanced protective suits, moving through landscapes that looked wrong in ways his mind couldn't quite process. These were taken during reconnaissance missions over the past 18 months, Kozlova explained, her voice clinical and professional despite the extraordinary nature of the evidence she was presenting. The figures in the environmental suits are human collaborators, individuals who have been modified through processes we don't understand to serve as intermediaries between the Echo-7 entities and conventional human forces. Webb picked up a photograph showing what appeared to be a construction site in mountainous terrain, massive structures rising from excavated caverns with architectural elements that hurt to look at directly. The scale was enormous, suggesting underground facilities that could house thousands of personnel and equipment on a scale that dwarfed conventional military installations. "Where is this?" "Approximately 40 kilometers northeast of your current position, in terrain that officially doesn't exist. The facility has been under construction for at least 5 years, using human labor supplemented by Echo-7 technology. Our intelligence suggests it's nearing operational status for whatever purpose the entities have planned." Another photograph showed the interior of what appeared to be an aircraft hangar, but the vehicles inside bore no resemblance to anything in any nation's inventory. They were sleek, organic-looking craft that seemed to flow rather than fly, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that suggested advanced stealth capabilities, combined with propulsion systems that operated on principles beyond current human understanding. How many of these facilities exist? That's the question that keeps Night Watch leadership awake at night. We've identified 17 confirmed sites across 3 continents, with suspected locations numbering in the dozens. Each facility represents years of construction, massive resource investment, and coordination between human collaborators and Echo-7 entities that suggests long-term planning on a scale most people can't comprehend. Webb set down the photographs with hands that had begun to tremble slightly despite his efforts at professional composure. The evidence before him challenged not just military doctrine but fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe, about the nature of the conflicts being fought in remote corners of the world, about the true purpose of operation that seemed to serve no obvious strategic objective. The collaborators, he said, his voice carefully controlled, are they willing participants? Kozlova's expression darkened further if such a thing were possible. Some are. Others. She paused, pulling another photograph from the stack. The modification process appears to be partially reversible, but we've never successfully extracted anyone who's undergone complete transformation. They become something that looks human but operates according to priorities that serve Echo-7 objectives rather than human welfare. The final photograph showed a close-up of one of the modified humans, and Webb felt his stomach lurch as he recognized the face. Colonel Daniel Morrison had been reported killed in action 6 months ago during a routine patrol. His body never recovered due to enemy activity in the area. Now he stared out from the photograph with eyes that were completely black, his features subtly wrong in ways that suggested underlying changes to bone structure and musculature. Jesus Christ, Webb whispered, the photograph shaking in his hands. Daniel Morrison was one of the best officers I ever served with, Kozlova said quietly. His transformation was documented through drone surveillance over a period of 3 weeks. The process appears to be gradual, involving exposure to what our technical analysts believe is some form of genetic manipulation combined with psychological conditioning. By the end, the individual retains memories and personality traits, but serves Echo-7 objectives with absolute loyalty. Webb set down the photograph and looked directly at Kozlova, seeing her with new understanding. How do I know you haven't been modified? How do I know this entire conversation isn't part of some elaborate conditioning operation? The question hung between them like a challenge, and for a moment Kozlova's professional mask slipped, revealing something that might have been hurt, or relief, or both. Because I'm telling you to verify everything independently, Marcus. I'm giving you tools and information that will let you conduct your own investigation, draw your own conclusions, make your own decisions about how to proceed. She reached into her jacket and withdrew what appeared to be a standard military radio, but Webb could see modifications to the antenna array and control surfaces that suggested capabilities beyond normal communication equipment. This device will let you monitor Echo-7 communication frequencies, assuming you can find someone with the technical expertise to make sense of what you intercept. Most of their traffic is encrypted using methods that make our best cryptographic systems look like children's toys, but sometimes they communicate in clear text for reasons we don't understand. Webb accepted the modified radio with the feeling that he was crossing a line from which there could be no return. The device was heavier than it should have been, its surface warm to the touch in ways that suggested internal components operating at temperatures beyond normal specifications. What do you want me to do with this information? Prepare your people, quietly and carefully. Start identifying personnel who might be suitable for expanded security clearances. Begin modifying training protocols to account for enemy capabilities that exceed current threat assessments. Most importantly, establish communication protocols with Night Watch assets in the region so we can coordinate response when the situation inevitably escalates. Kozlova moved toward the hangar door, her mission apparently complete now that she'd transferred the burden of impossible knowledge to someone in a position to act on it. I'll be operating from a forward position for the next several weeks, gathering intelligence on Echo-7 preparations, and attempting to determine their timeline for whatever operation they're planning. You won't see me again unless the situation deteriorates to the point where conventional forces need direct night watch support. She paused at the door, her hand on the control switch that would plunge the hangar back into concealing darkness. Marcus, I need you to understand something. The woman you knew 3 years ago died in that training accident, just as the official reports claimed. What came back is something different, shaped by experiences and knowledge that change a person in fundamental ways. Don't try to rekindle what we had, because it doesn't exist anymore. The lights went out, leaving Webb alone in the darkness with evidence of impossible truths and technology that challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of warfare. When his eyes adjusted enough to navigate the hangar, Kozlova was gone, vanished as silently as she'd appeared, leaving only the lingering scent of jet fuel and the weight of secrets that would reshape his understanding of military service. Webb made his way back to his quarters through the sleeping base, the modified radio and photographs hidden in his jacket like contraband that could destroy careers and challenge the foundations of everything he'd sworn to protect. Tomorrow would bring questions he couldn't answer, demands for explanations that didn't exist in any official documentation, and the beginning of preparations for a war that most of his personnel couldn't imagine. The next morning arrived with the surreal normalcy of routine military operations proceeding around secrets that could reshape civilization. Webb attended the standard briefing, reviewed intelligence reports that seemed quaint compared to the evidence hidden in his quarters, and maintained the facade of conventional command authority, while his mind churned through implications that grew more disturbing with each passing hour. Major Hendricks approached him after the morning staff meeting with a secure communication device and an expression that suggested official interest from higher authority. "Sir, we've received a priority message from CENTCOM regarding Major Kozlova's reappearance. They're requesting a complete debrief and immediate transfer of the officer to a classified facility for extensive evaluation." Webb accepted the communication device with steady hands despite the alarm sounding in his mind. CENTCOM's interest in Kozlova suggested that her return had triggered automated systems designed to identify security anomalies, but their desire to remove her from his custody raised questions about whether conventional military channels could be trusted with information about Echo-7 entities and night watch operations. "Where is Major Kozlova currently?" Webb asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Unknown, sir. She signed out through the main gate at 600 hours, stating she was conducting a routine reconnaissance flight. Her aircraft departed on a filed flight plan that shows a return time of 1400 hours, but air traffic control lost contact with her approximately 20 minutes after takeoff." Webb nodded, unsurprised by Kozlova's disappearance, but concerned about the official attention her brief presence had generated. The Night Watch clearly operated with sophisticated understanding of conventional military bureaucracy, timing their operations to minimize exposure while maximizing intelligence gathering effectiveness. "Prepare a response to CENTCOM indicating that Major Kozlova departed the base before we could conduct a comprehensive debrief. Include standard language about ongoing search and rescue operations, while noting the sensitive nature of her apparent survival and return." Hendricks nodded and departed to craft the required communication, leaving Webb alone with the knowledge that his response would buy time, but couldn't indefinitely deflect official interest in Kozlova's impossible resurrection. Eventually, investigators would arrive with security clearances that exceeded his own, demanding answers to questions he was only beginning to understand himself. The remainder of the morning was spent in routine activities that felt increasingly surreal against the backdrop of impossible revelations. Webb reviewed maintenance reports for aircraft that might soon face enemy technology decades beyond current threat assessments, approved patrol routes that might encounter forces equipped with weapons systems that operated outside conventional physics, and briefed pilots on engagement protocols that assumed adversaries bound by the same limitations that constrained human forces. During the lunch hour, Webb made his way to the communications center with the modified radio Kozlova had provided, ostensibly to conduct routine equipment inspections, but actually to test the device's capabilities without attracting unwanted attention. Technical Sergeant Williams, the senior communications specialist, greeted him with professional courtesy and complete ignorance of the extraordinary technology being introduced to his equipment racks. "Sergeant Williams, I need you to conduct some frequency monitoring using this equipment," Webb said, producing the modified radio. "The specifics are classified, but we're looking for unusual signal traffic in bands that aren't currently covered by our standard monitoring protocols." Williams examined the device with the professional interest of someone who'd spent 20 years working with military electronics, his expression shifting from routine curiosity to puzzled fascination as he noted the modifications and capabilities that exceeded anything in the current inventory. "Sir, this equipment appears to incorporate technology that's significantly advanced compared to our current systems. The frequency range alone suggests capabilities that would require specialized antennas and signal processing equipment we don't currently possess." Webb nodded, grateful for Williams' expertise and discretion. "Consider this a field evaluation of prototype systems, Sergeant. Document anything you find, but keep the information restricted to personnel with appropriate security clearances." Williams connected the device to his monitoring station and began scanning through frequency ranges that should have contained only static or routine commercial traffic. Within minutes, his expression changed from professional curiosity to concerned confusion as the modified radio began picking up signal traffic that defied conventional understanding. "Sir, I'm receiving structured transmissions on frequencies that should be empty. The signal strength suggests local sources, probably within 50 kilometers of our position, but the encoding methods don't match anything in our database. The patterns suggest digital communication, but the underlying protocols appear to be significantly more sophisticated than anything I've encountered." Webb leaned closer to the monitoring equipment, watching displays that showed signal patterns unlike anything produced by conventional military or commercial systems. The transmissions pulsed with rhythmic precision that suggested coordination between multiple sources, their timing and frequency shifts indicating a level of operational complexity that implied extensive infrastructure and resources. "Can you determine the source locations?" Williams worked his equipment with practiced efficiency, using direction-finding techniques to triangulate the origins of the mysterious signals. "The primary source appears to be northeast of our position, in mountainous terrain that's outside our normal area of operations. Secondary sources are scattered throughout the region, suggesting a network of coordinated stations operating under centralized control." The geographic correlation with the photographs Kozlova had shown him the night before sent a chill down Webb's spine. The Echo 7 facility she documented was apparently not just a construction site, but an active operational base conducting communications that could be monitored by anyone with the appropriate equipment and expertise. "Sergeant, I need you to establish a monitoring protocol for these signals. Document transmission times, frequency patterns, and any changes in activity level. Also, prepare a secure communication link that we can use to contact external assets if the situation requires coordination with specialized units." Williams nodded, his professionalism overriding his obvious curiosity about the unusual assignment.